Welcome back to the Successful Farming Podcast. In today's episode, machinery expert Dave Mowat sits down with Andy Campbell, Director of Insights at Tractor Zoom, to break down the latest trends in the used combine equipment market. They explore what auction data is revealing about inventory levels, how depreciation is playing a role on high-end machines, and what the future holds for large combines in American agriculture.
I'm Dave Mowat with Successful Farming. Joining me is Andy Campbell with Tractor Zoom, kind of the site to go to if you want to know what's going on with used equipment, especially with the auction listings that they have. Over 1,000 auctioneers now are signed up. Yeah. And then you do the analysis side of the trend analysis side of transactions, what has happened in the past, what's coming in the future. And that's why you're so invaluable, especially about today's topic. Here it is. We're in June, and guys are anticipating harvest because they can kind of see the crop that's coming, save for some windstorms and hailstorms. They kind of know what's going on. They're thinking about that combine's getting a little long in the tooth. Maybe I ought to change up. And so today we're talking about combines. And I always love this time of year because especially July, August, we move a lot of harvesters. Are we seeing numbers? Yeah, you've been tracking a couple auctions, you said.
Yes.
Are we beginning to see combines coming on the marketplace, first of all?
Yes. But first of all, I'm going to need you to send me that clip where you mentioned that I was invaluable, and I need to send it to my wife just to make sure that she knows.
I'd be happy to.
So
yes, I can say other fine things about you too.
Right.
I know you married homely, but then again, he's invaluable.
Right,
stuff
exactly.
like that.
Just always those reminders are good. And, but yeah, on the tractorzoom.com site. So we've got a ton of auctions, like I said, over 1,000 auctioneers we work with, but we also have, I think it's now, we partner with upwards to 1,600 different dealer locations.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I left that out. Yes. Oh. This is the thing about Tractor Zoom that's surprising is the number of dealers, because now you're encompassing the entire marketplace. Auctions represent about a third or less of all used machinery. The rest are dealers locations. So that's a lot of listings. So it's giving you a lot of good, solid numbers.
Yeah, but that does segue well into what you're asking about. Are we seeing a lot of combines hit the market at this time of year? And because we watch the dealer market so closely and work with a ton of dealers across the country, that it's usually this time of year when those combines come on market. Mm-hmm. A lot of them are coming from dealer lots. So it's an inventory reduction strategy that a lot of them have to make after a while. And so last year in 2024, that drove a ton of combines and other pieces of equipment to the market.
Right.
And so we're following that again this year that, we've had 3 that I've tracked here this past, I should say 3 big auctions. Big Iron had one, Steffes had one, and then Merritt actually did a neat thing where they combined, had to be like 6 different farmers and 4 or 5 different dealerships together in a big multicolored auction that happened. And so all of that kind of came together, and it's produced a good amount of combines that have been on the market already this year. But again, not nearly the amount that we had last year.
So inventories, we cleared a lot of stuff out last year because I noticed that bulge of machines that went out the door. But does that mean we have far fewer machines being traded in now? Or farmers holding off a bit on turning over combines where they'd normally turn after 1, 2, or 3 years? Now they're saying, now we'll just milk it for another year. Is that what's cutting down inventory?
Yeah, you're getting right to the meat of it, Dave. So no wasting time. That is probably one of the biggest dilemmas that the used equipment market is finding right now, is the fact that in 21, 22, when times were really good, there were a lot of farmers that kind of forward bought. Mm-hmm. And so if they're typically every 3-year type of rotation, or maybe even a 5 or a 10-year type of rotation, it made sense for them to forward buy and move up their schedule a little bit. Some of them also kind of went up a scale. And so they might have upgraded equipment and gone to a slightly larger, class in combines or tractor. And so what that's done is it's set them up well for the future. They might have a little bit higher equipment payments right now, especially with the interest rates, but it's allowed them to, maybe reduce their purchasing right now. And so they can kind of weather this low point in the storm. And that's just compounded the issue of excess inventory on the market, just because there's not as much of that trading activity going on right now.
Yeah. And I'm guessing, getting back to what I said before, we're not going to see as many new used, I hate that term, year-old combines necessarily coming, year-old combines hitting the market this year, because people are just kind of farmers are stepping back saying, one more year. It's kind of tough right now to be
It,
able to
it
justify a new combine.
It is a little bit, but that's where the supply chain of large equipment isn't completely streamlined, because those, maybe, let's say, a 2 or 3 year old piece that was produced in the heyday, in
Hmm.
21, 22, that is coming back on the market, or it's at least sitting on a dealer lot somewhere. And so we're seeing a buildup of a lot of these late model type of machines that are out there with a pretty high, even though they've been used once, maybe a one
Hmm.
owner, possibly a two owner, that they still have a pretty high price tag. And
Yeah.
that's a tough pill to swallow when you have, 440 corn and,
Yeah.
beans that are swinging all over the place, but still barely profitable, if that. So that creates a little bit of a challenge for farmers with high initial new equipment prices. But now we're back to, 2050.
Yeah. Well, I tracked recent sales of like Deere S780s. There are a lot of those
There are, yes.
available right now, and the recent sales at auction were $330,000. That was that Sullivan auction that was
Hmm.
recently held. 330,000 locked in. These were maybe 300, 400 separator hours and fully equipped. Would you consider that, i.e., compared to the past, the going lower, higher, in the middle? Because these are the first dribs and drabs of combines that are going to now hit and
Hmm.
come in big numbers, we hope, this
Yeah.
come July and August.
Yeah, yeah. The S780s, for better or for worse, they are the canary in the coal mine, and they have been the last couple of years, at least
Yeah.
for combine sales. There's a ton of them out there, and we say there's a ton of them out there. The problem now isn't nearly as bad as it was last summer for dealer lots. So we've actually seen about a 3.5% reduction in the total supply of these S780s that are out there.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's from last year. But
Even
20,
3% drops. There's still
oh
a
yeah,
boatload of these, aren't there?
boatload's a nice way a good 4 letter word to put it in. Yes. Because in 24, there were a ton more than 23. And so there's still too many out there for really what the market can handle. So some dealers are having to, liquidate that, send it out to auction. And so, yeah, you bring up, the Sullivan auction. Big Iron had a dealer auction.
Mm-hmm.
They sold a 22 with 700 step hours, 4-wheel drive, good machine, for about 278,000. And right.
Yeah.
And so, and I also looked, Steffes had an auction. They sold 3 of them. That was a dealer auction. And then the Wheeler auction that I mentioned had one that was a 21 and it sold. But the big difference was whether things actually brought what I would consider current market value, things that have trended a little bit into 25 so far. If it was a really late model, so if it was only a year or two old, then it's bringing market value. If it's not, if it's older than that, then it's slipping, and it's slipping pretty fast. So to break that down a little bit, so the Big Iron one that I had, it was a 2022, not too old. The earlier part of 25, so January, February, March, April, I trend all this stuff, and the trending going rate would have been 275,000 for that that combine. It hit 278. So it was almost like right on the nose, probably where I would have expected it. And then the one of the Steffes auction ones, it was a 23 with a little less than 500 step hours on it.
Mm-hmm.
I pegged it at 322. It hit 322 exactly. And so those, I'm watching them. I'm like, okay, the market is holding steady. But then you break down further in that Steffes auction, they sold a 2020, one with 800 step hours. They sold a 2019 with a little shy of 1,400 step hours. Both of those brought, the first one brought 50,000 less than I thought it would. The other one brought, about another 50,000 less than I thought it would. Significantly less.
So
Same auction.
So if you're a farmer, always looks for that he likes to buy the 5-year-old machine, for example, or in around that time. This is the time to be looking, sharpening your pencil and thinking about changing machines. Because these are,
and it's really,
the ones
it
I
seems to
noticed
be
a couple
demand
that
driven.
you
So
mentioned.
it's those
They
farmers
have
that
fairly low separate.
Right.
Yeah.
I know those are not bad machines. But and so really it's not a factor of the machine. I think it's probably a little more indicative of the who's feeling the pinch right now in the farm economy. And if you are maybe that third buyer that's looking at something here that's now 7, 8, 9 years old, you're probably feeling a bit more of a pinch than maybe a second buyer would, somebody who's just buying something that's 2 years old. And so that's my guess of what's happening at auction. And that's kind of where I'm seeing, depend on if you're a buyer or seller, that's where I'm seeing the weaker prices come.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting when certainly we get the latest models, the latest Case IH and the latest Deere. In the Deere cases, that the X9000 or 1100.
Yep.
Those things, not as many listings, but that would be tracked towards a secondary buyer with a fairly large operation that's looking to have at least a better harvester for its second machine, maybe even adding a third, depending upon the operation. Those seem to be moving a little more fluidly than, say, you get into the 60s. I'm sorry, S680s, 780s, especially the S780s, as there's a glut on the market right now. So the opportunity, I guess, what exists is if you are at least slightly interested, a good thing to do right now is start getting on websites and start looking for those cherry buys, which would be, a 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old machine that has low separator hours. That's always the key, isn't it? And I was surprised how many of these were running 2 to 3 to 400 hour separator hours.
Yeah.
As I've always said, my dad would consider that barely broken in.
Right. From what I worked on last summer, I would have gladly taken something with only 3-digit separator.
Wait a minute. We're going to take a pause here. What did you work on last summer? You got to.
There's always going to be these stories. No, we had a pretty massive overhaul. We have a 9870 STS, and so the blower fan was busted, probably from a bearing that we changed the year prior. But to remove that, you have to remove the duals. Yeah. And so you had to take those front tires off. Taking those off, we knew the shaker arms needed to be replaced soon. But while we had that all stripped off, we're like, why not just replace it now?
Why not? Just go in there.
Why not? And oh my God. So pulling that whole apparatus out of the back end of that combine, and I don't know how I drew the lucky straw to climb up in there, but I lived in there. I mean, I had bruises on my hips from laying back across there. And we had changed some bearings out on the inside too, but nothing was easy to reach. The tolerances were so tight on those, the chaffer and everything. So it was an education for sure.
Yeah, I was the smallest. For some reason, I always got to pull the calves because of my arms, long, lanky little arms, but also they'd send me into the combine to go start seeing what the problem was.
Yeah, I was the biggest. So I'm by far the biggest. So that makes no sense at all.
Well, at least they could grab your feet and pull you out if something went wrong. I suppose that's the only advantage. Me, I'm lost in there. I'm a shorter guy. So, but I can rummage around the combine, hope nobody starts a darn thing. So, but that's old combine, straw walkers we're talking in those days, which is another deal altogether. So, you have a what? What was the combine again? And how old?
9870.
Oh, your dad always used so big time, doesn't he? Yeah.
No,
what, 20, 25 years?
Yeah, I don't think it's probably about that old.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great combine. Keeps going. Yeah.
It does. Yeah. It works with the operation well, and everything just needs to be fixed every once in a while. But and to your point, I mean, getting to, maybe the lack of repairs on some of these newer items, you're talking about the class 9s, class 10s, some of these bigger combines that are out there. And, this is also the talk of the town of who is going to buy this traded in type of machine. And so that's something that we constantly watch. Like when those things come across at auctions, like, okay, where is that price point going to fall at auction? And again, there's a pretty significant depreciation from what the sticker price is to, even what that one-time use, maybe a 2-year of depreciation on those. It's significant.
Right. Are we talking like the X9?
Right.
1,000, 1,100?
Yeah.
Those, how big a depreciation does that experience?
Well, and that's where the numbers get a little harder to track because if you go off of MSRP, so if you go off of like sticker price MSRP, what those things are, what they're advertised for, and then what they resell, there's a few of them that'll hit auction. You're talking hundreds and hundreds of dollars per hour, which doesn't pencil out. But you also have to keep in mind that whoever is buying that is not buying it at a full rate. They're likely getting a significant deal for being buying multi-unit deals and spending a lot of money and having some kind of commitment to being a good customer. So it's discounted at the front end and no one really knows that price. And that's, it pencils out apparently well for them. I think the bigger challenge in the industry is going to be that this massive combine, and not just the X9s, because I know Case is coming out with one here
Right.
soon
Yes.
too, and there's a few other larger ones. But these huge machines are almost better suited for Brazil. It's
Bigger acres,
yeah,
broader.
bigger acres, just going across mass amount of acres in more of a just a huge swath, and also being able to go completely north to south and not being one and done in a couple counties, but really being able to take advantage of the latitude of playing in the North Country and then being shipped to the Southern Country. And I think it's going to create a bit of an issue here. It already has with the way that American farming is set up. Yeah. So that's just a challenge that I think our industry is going to have to work through here in the next few years.
If we're talking Montana, that's one thing.
Right.
But Kentucky, I mean, they're using folding heads just to get down the road. And once they get beyond an 8-row head, it gets very problematic for them to get the machines around. Now you got one of these gigantic machines, unless you're right, it's a big acreage and most of it very close. I kind of wonder if we haven't reached the PowerPoint, the size point where maybe they've gone too far for the need of like American agriculture, except for spots like I mentioned out west. And then there's the other question is, I know labor's an issue, big issue, but wouldn't you be better off with a second combine? And then you could have that run in beans while you're running corn, which is occurring now at the same time.
Right.
And if you're spread over a 30, 40 mile period, it's going to rain in one spot, it won't rain in the other. So there's all these questions coming up, with planters being the other one. Guys have huge planters. Some will run now 2 planters for that reason.
Right.
So I kind of wonder.
Yeah. You don't necessarily have to change over, especially, on the planter side, if one set up for corn, one set up for beans, and then you've got that set up. What we did at our farm was we had 2 of those 9870 STSs. Probably could have waited a year or two to buy the second one and bought it at the dip here instead of at the peak. But hey, if I would have known what I was doing, then it would have been smarter.
Oh, you do? Yeah.
I know.
You wait to buy that you had to do and the time. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll just consider it.
But it does make sense when you're looking at it for certain operations that, the depreciation curve is a little flatter and you can handle that. And then also you just have the redundancies of when one breaks down, you do have another. And then the packing of parts. For the shaker arms, we had shaker arms that were good on one and the other, so we can make choices there instead of having to have 2 different types of parts to support 2 different types of machines. Yeah. So for, not for all operations, but for some, it does make sense to do that.
So if we break down the marketplace right now, I'd noticed one trend analysis had mentioned that auction prices were kind of on the rise for combines, but asking were flat. Does that make sense right now?
It does. And I'm glad you heard that from somewhere, because I've been looking at my data like, is this right? Because, well, at least I would say it depends on when you heard that, because I tracked, again, getting back to the Class 8 combines, which is largely dominated by those S780s, but also Cases 8250 and
the 82, a lot of 8250s out there.
Yeah. And so from auction standpoint in the first quarter, so you got January a little bit, but there's some decent sales in February and especially into March. And we saw a 6% increase at auction values on those year over year. Now, you take that forward just a little bit, though, and here in May just stinks for auctions in terms of data and volume. There's just not enough out there in May. So you can't really base much on May. But so far in June, we've had a decent amount of these Class 8 combines go, and I'm starting to see it soften now. So in general, looking at all Class 8 combines that fit the bill of somewhere between 500 to 1,500 hours. So I got a fairly tight range in there, machine hours. Yeah. I'm seeing that soften from about 5% down. So where we did see really strong, pretty much February, March values at auction, I'm seeing that reverse itself here so far in June and drop. So, and there's a little bit more to this story, because as I've been going through this in our Tractor Zoom data, and this kind of gets into the detail that a lot of our dealers will use and some of our ag lenders, when they really have to kind of nail down a value and truly know the market. I started diving in about, what is really driving this. And it gets back to, when you and I were talking about super low hours versus, some aging type of machines. And that was the clue. When I started to look at things that were just newer than 2022, so we're talking 1, 2, at most 3 years old, with less than 700 SEP hours on it, or 700 machine hours, so probably 500 SEP hours on it. Those values have actually still kept up. They've increased 17% year over year. Like that is a strong spot in the market right now.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, but it's not the case once you go higher hours and older.
As you mentioned before, there we see a softness.
Yeah, yep, and that's where I'm seeing things start to drop. I've got in a section I'm looking at here, so 1,000 to 2,500 machine hours, older machines. I'm seeing those drop about 3% year over year. So that's where the market's weakening. But there are sections of the market that are strengthening. And again, I think it has less to do with the supply that's out there, more right now, at least, to do with demand. At least that's probably my interpretation of, reading through the tea leaves.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder how. So we're entering into the combine season, as I love to call it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll put you on the spot here. June now, July, August is when we move, and early September, we move a lot of combines. Will the trends that you see right now stay? I hate to ask you that because, it's the crystal ball, but this is that we're seeing very competitive dealer asking prices. It seems like maybe that's where farmers need to really look first to see what's available there if they are thinking about changing up.
Yeah. If we're in the market for a combine, that's actually where I would be going right now, is going to a dealer. Yeah, there's still an excess amount of supply out there. It might be down 3% year over year for those, Class 8s, but still too much.
Right.
And so you also have a bit more of that reliability from a dealer of having it looked over. They can tell you who the previous buyer was. So you get all that kind of assurance that you need. But let's take a bit of a history lesson and look back last year. And last year, the combine market did continue to fall a little bit throughout the summer. So Agrivision had a really big auction with Rice Auctioneers down in Southwest Iowa at the beginning of the year last year. And that really kind of set the market. There's a fair amount of combines that sold there, but then there was a lot of other auctions that happened throughout the year. And what we saw as a premium buyers kind of were taken out of the market. Then whoever was left over came to buy the next combines. And then a couple weeks later, whoever was left bought the next combines. And you continually took out the top buyers in the market to the point where you got to the end and you probably just had jockeys left over for the most part, or some people that were just sitting on the fence for so long and were a reluctant buyer. So that's what happened last year. But last year we had the boatload, the safe 4-letter word that we're using today, that there was just so many more of those at auction. And, I was looking just the other day from auctions. I think there was like 33, at least so far this year, there's about 33% less auctions this year than there were last year to date. And so I think that's probably going to continue throughout the summer. And so getting back to the history lesson piece, I don't think we're going to see a repeat of 24 that we saw in 25. I don't think we're going to see this market absolutely just drop because there's not an excess amount of supply. It's certainly not growing. Dealers are going to, they'll liquidate some of their inventory because they have to, but they're not going to preemptively do this. Most of them have already done it. And yeah, so I don't think we're going to have that same scenario play out. But that doesn't mean that we still don't have, really high interest rates that those dealers have to pay interest rate on. Their holding costs are high. So there's incentive for them to strike a deal with a farmer and move things. But it's not like you can just sit back and say, okay, that thing's coming to auction tomorrow. I'm just going to sit and wait because, it's not going to be like last summer. It probably won't.
Right. Yeah. So in other words, if you see the machine that you want, that you need, don't wait on the opportunity to buy it if it fits within your pocketbook or your needs. And it seems to me that then don't overlook the dealer's lot as you drive into auction. Know what's available. Go on the websites. Case IH is a great one. Deere is a great dealer listing website and start poking around there because transport of combines, it's pretty seamless anymore. You can run a combine 5-6 states away, which we see a lot of, don't we? When we see Midwest combines, the cherry combines of the whole industry are from the Midwest, and we see them going to Texas and to Alabama and Colorado and areas like that. So, but what was significant about the numbers, and we talked about that before, was that the S780 on dealer listings at 1,800. I don't know if I've ever quite seen that many. Deere's site had a total number of combines. Now, this is everything. Although for dealers, they're not going to run an old combine in their lot. Unless it's really, really good shape, they're not really parking combines in their lot that are older than 10 years old. Is that about the cutoff point?
Yeah,
They send off.
different dealers will do it differently. There will be some deer dealers and NKSH dealers who will have a hard cutoff where they don't want anything, more than 8 years old in their lot.
Mm-hmm.
They'll have things maybe momentarily, but it'll be there for a month and then gone. And then there's some other ones where even having a 10-year-old combine is a pretty significant capital investment for them, and so they may have it out there. So it just kind of depends on the structure and size of the dealership, on how old of a machine they have. I would say that maybe the bigger thing that we work with a lot of our dealers on is just the aged inventory of, if it hasn't sold in 30, 60, 90 days, then its ability to sell from that point forward is low, So is it priced wrong? Is it in the wrong location? It's identifying those things early, and it's less on it's just too old. So that's what we work with a lot of our dealers on.
That gives you the opportunity to change up on your farm's combine, so you don't have to crawl back in and do repair like you did, right?
I'm so familiar with this thing inside and out now. I don't think I ever want to get rid of it.
I don't know. Deere had a lot of S780s. Wouldn't it be nice to have an S780 on your farm? Probably larger than what you need, though, isn't it?
It is really except for last year. So we broke the bubbler auger last year because we just hit a period of corn that was on one of our worst farms, and it had to be like 330 bushels to the acre. It was ungodly. And of course I was driving it, not at all prepared. And our yield monitor, and so we had a couple of the loss detection out of the back that was busted, which would have been the early indicator that I was going too fast through this one section. And just plugged the elevator up and busted the bubbler auger. So again, beggars can't be choosers.
Was it wet corn?
No, it wasn't too bad.
Oh, it was good dry. Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
I plugged the elevator up before with wet corn. It's time to make sour mash at that point in time. Oh my God, that was so hard to get unplugged. Yeah, my dad gave me a look, but we're not going to get into that. Old memories. So opportunities sitting on dealer lots right now. Take a hard look at that. Get on the website, see what's out there. If you are on the fence or really thinking about adding to your combine harvesting or your harvesting fleet, that's the opportunity. Although it's always kind of fun to see what the auction sites are coming up with.
Oh yeah.
Do you expect to see more auction listings from dealers as this season goes on, as we get into August?
There will be more. I don't expect a ton more.
Oh, okay.
So there will be more. I think just knowing a lot of the dealers out there and the amount of inventory that's sitting on lots, people have to get rid of it. But I don't think we'll have, again, like what we had last year. And so it'll be more than what we saw in 23 for sure, but not a ton. And then the other thing on the combine front, because I track also just the size of combines, with that being a big question of how many Class 9 combines were out in 22 versus 23, 4.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about size.
Yeah. And so I track that on the dealer lots, what's actually sitting out there. And I also look at this at the auction too. And really it's been steady at auction in terms of the proportion of Class 8s, 7s, 6s, and 5s. It hasn't really shifted a ton at auction in the past, I'd say from 2018 to 23.
Really?
It's been relatively steady. Now it's starting to shift a little bit more in 24 just because there were so many, Class 8s that hit auction. And now we're starting to see some of these X9s come out there. And so that is shifting it a little bit, although there's huge dollar value, but there's just few of them. But on the dealer lot, we're definitely starting to see this transformation and almost a continuation of the transformation of bigger combines. Back in, it was just in 22, Class 6 and 5s made up 31% of the market on dealer lots. And man, now they're less than 18% in 2025. So
wow,
not quite half.
Yeah, they have
dropped. Yeah, but you just, Deere's not making them anymore. And a lot of others have just pulled back production. So you just, if you're after a Class 6 or a 5, if that fits your bill, you're not going to find it very easily on a dealer lot. It's going to be kind of one of those old vinyl records that at some point it's going to be worth a gem. It's just not now.
It's always it's always fun, like in Deere, to look at the breakdown when you go from 780 down 680 in the numbers that just start plummeting, 580, right? And then, of course, they all sit out in eastern farming area too, the smaller combines. So they have their little sweet area there. But Yeah, it's pretty amazing now that this new class of combines, well, new by 2 years that we've had the X9s on the marketplace.
Yeah, it would have been. Yeah, I think it was 22 when they pushed him a little early in the
Right.
fall. I think that was the fall
Yeah, how
when they
that's
did that.
all, yeah, how that's all breaking out. The thing about, bigger is better to a point. And I do remember the advice I was given by several engineers, both those working for universities, but product engineers at companies. And that is, you look at a bigger combine, you say, I'd love to have the bigger combine. And yeah, the yields, increase yields, like you talked about, over 300 bushel corn would justify it. But you get a big combine, the best way to run a combine in the field is fully charged, right?
Hmm.
You don't want to
Right.
have a big combine running with only at 70% capacity. And you
Right.
can only run them so fast over a field to feed that crop in.
Hmm.
Especially, you might be challenged with header loss if you start pushing the speed too much in lighter spots of the field. So it's kind of a gamut there that guys have to kind of figure out if they want to. What happens is the losses out the back of the combine start escalating if you don't keep it fully charged. But full MOG input is what a lot of guys used to call it.
Right. Yeah, they were designed for a certain speed and a thrasher speed and everything, and so that's optimal. Now, granted, there's a lot of other variables out there, like just the amount of trash that you're throwing through there and the
Yeah,
moisture, but it's designed for an optimal speed. But you also have a whole lot else to consider in terms of getting the crop out. Some farmers are really tight for time when they have to get
right.
something out, and so being efficient is incredibly important. And not everywhere, but the last couple of years, it's been an easier harvest, at least here in Iowa. So we've had more time.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of you didn't have to push the dryer as fast. It wasn't as important
Hmm.
to always keep the combine running. But when it is, you've got the downstream truck or trucks that you have pulling it from the field. Are you sending it to town? Are you taking it to the dryer? What's the speed of the dryer and the moisture that you want to store it at? And I mean, it's just essentially a manufacturing process engineering problem of where's your bottleneck, and then trying to put your bottleneck, if you're a process engineer, you want it at the very beginning of your process, which is essentially your combine.
Hmm.
And if you beef up your combine, you turn that into the not bottleneck, it's just going to move that bottleneck somewhere
Yeah.
downstream.
Is it through
And
the
that's
trucks,
inefficient.
as we talked about last time? Semis is we're seeing increased uses of semis by farmers because now the combines are bigger, the yields are larger. They have to get that crop to the field, but out of the field at home. But then it's sitting there waiting for a smaller dryer or a smaller leg or just not enough capacity at that end. So once you go up to an X9, once you start going to the larger combine, you got to look at the whole system and ask
Hmm.
yourself if that's part of the deal too, as well. And,
Right.
and that comes into play if you're running two combines as well, more capacity coming into the farm.
Right. But then you also can run one beans if you want. You have that
True.
flexibility.
Yeah.
But I think getting back to the topic we talked about earlier, and again, this is a much larger topic for someone smarter than I to hopefully figure out. But it's designing equipment for not just for that first farmer, but really from the life cycle of all
Right.
the farmers in that are going to be trading it and using it and then reusing it. And it because an X9 fits the farmers that have it now probably well, really well. It's that what happens when they need to trade it into that second or that third buyer? Is their shed going to be big enough to put this thing into? Is their dryer going to be big enough? All these questions that we're bringing up. And that's, I think, where there probably wasn't the foresight, and there's an opportunity to right size
Yeah.
the scenario out there.
Yeah. As we change it, do you mind? I got to put you on the spot because we talk about downstream and
Hmm.
taking that crop out of the field. The critical thing between the combine and the semi sitting on the edge is that wagon,
Hmm.
the carts that are out there. And I noticed the carts again seem to be pushing new limits on
Right.
sizes. Is there a limit to carts? I'm not sure. I mean, they'll
I've seen
build
some
it to the
huge ones.
size that fits the tractor that pulls it, and the tractors are getting bigger.
Hmm.
So I remember the day when 1,000 bushel grain cart was big.
Hmm.
Now, gosh, those are medium-sized carts that are out there. When we come to used machines, grain carts are a whole different dog, aren't they? They run longer than a combine typically would be, aren't they?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We certainly see. I mean, you have a lot less moving parts, and it's more of the functionality. How well does it fit the farm? Your moving parts are, the rubber that you have on it and the tires. You've got tracks now on a lot of the heavier ones. And so just with the weight distribution, that's important. And then the limitation of the tractor pulling it. But I would again say that there's a lot of quality manufactured carts out there.
Well, certainly. Yeah.
So, but from an operation standpoint, again, you want your bottleneck at the very beginning. And so if your cart outsizes your combine, then what did it really gain you? And if your cart outsizes just the sheer number of semi-drivers and trucks that you have, then you might be loading that truck or that cart up, dumping it in a truck, but then that guy has to jump out, take the truck, take it to town, bring it back, or take it to the dryer, bring it back, and then just simply do it all over again. And it didn't gain you anything. And so the, if you have multiple trucks, it could work. And I think a lot of those really big ones, the big carts, were meant for larger and longer fields. Again, a great thing for Brazil, maybe a great thing more out west where you have longer wheat fields where you don't have to drive all the way down, all the way back. So you're saving fuel cost, you're saving time. There's a lot of sense to be made there, but it probably doesn't fit out east. And even here in some 160 acre, 80 acre field in the Midwest, I don't know if it works.
They're going to be limits to size. Excuse me. They're going to be limits to size by the acre. Here's my $1 million question. The dark zone of used equipment sometimes is grain carts and finding them used because they're run so long. They're rarely ever seen on dealers' lots. Do they go strictly auction?
We see a lot of them at auction. It's not solely though. I think one of the reasons why you don't see a prevalence of them on dealer lots is because, John Deere doesn't make them. Case doesn't make them. And so
unless they're an Underfirth dealer or J&M. Yeah.
Well, but that's just it. So, and it's not that they wouldn't carry them because they do, but it's not their number one brand. And so when you're looking at, making metrics for your, the hand that feeds, it's not that one. And without them being a main line, they're a short line. I think that's one of the main reasons why you just don't see a ton of them traded on dealer lots. Also, I think they run longer. And at least our experience has been the grain cart that we had, 10 years ago was fantastic. And it was, our only reason to upgrade was just a little bit of our new operation, but it wasn't wear and tear. And so they almost do too good of a job.
They almost leave the farm, go to the scrapyard. They're used that long.
Yeah, a lot of them can. I mean, yeah.
The flighting goes. Now the metal's getting a little thin on the sidewalls, and it may be destined for that. So no trends there. We talked about semi trucks last time. It really is tough when you get into things like grain dryers. It's just not much of a used market for grain dryers out there. It's a new buy almost all the time, right?
Right.
And I by the way, I did notice one thing that we talked about semi trucks the last time and trailers too. There has been a bit of news in that area. It seems that we're beginning to get more hesitancy of people buying trucks. I know that was trending. Then it came back again. So I'm not sure if the trucking industry has decided what they're doing or that's the people buying trucks, but it is definitely in a big flux right at the point in time that it is now. And that's because of the trade situation that's still trying to resolve itself. But you'd said that you felt that when it came to semi-trucks, last time we talked about it, wait until the end of the year. That's when you're going to see the opportunity to buy a good used truck.
Yeah, that's when seasonally we typically do. Now you've got, factors within each year that could change. And this year with tariffs and potential inflation, not inflation, there's a lot of different variables that are going on this year. But typically when the trucking season hits a lull, that's a good time to make a buy because they will buy and sell machines fairly quickly. Again, it's really one of those, it's not driven by the ag industry at all.
Yeah.
It's that over the road.
That small percentage. Well, let me think. We've covered, did I leave anything out of combines?
And I mean, I know that we've, talked a lot about the class 8s and, the S780s and stuff. One of the things that we work with a lot of our lenders on, but also our dealers, anybody that's helping a farmer set a lease residual if they're not buying, is kind of understanding the depreciation rate of combines and just over hours. So obviously, if you're a first time buyer, you're taking whatever you can get from the manufacturer and then trading that in, but also just being essentially tracking the value of your equipment over time.
Mm-hmm.
So you understand the rate of depreciation, the rate of operation for you.
Mm-hmm.
But also if you need to lease it, that at some point, and it's actually getting a little more popular right now, is a lease versus buy scenario. does it make sense for my operation to actually own this equipment? And I get to build equity by owning it. But at the same time, certain depreciation rates are pretty steep. So does it make sense for me just to lease it, not take on that extra risk, have a known cost in my operation? And so we'll track that a lot. And a lot of people use our tractorzoom.com. You can kind of go in there and get estimates of pieces of equipment at 1,500 hours versus 2,000 hours. If you plan on using it for 500, they'll say, okay, the difference between those 2 points, that's how much I can expect for it to depreciate in a year. And then you can start to make those educated decisions.
Well, these days, too, compared to the good old days when I first started running or looking at used equipment values and trend analysis till now, but back then it was still kind of looking into the dark if you were trying to predict values, prices, when to move. Today, the amount of information that TractorZoom offers for analysis. I mean, you can be a very educated buyer when it comes to used equipment by going to TractorZoom and doing your analysis up front. Not only how much you want to think you're going to pay, but what would be the best time of the year to move on this. So fewer and fewer guys are going to, say, auction blindly just bidding on equipment. They have a hard price fixed in, don't they, that they think that thing is worth.
Yeah. Yeah. And what we actually see, not just auction, we were talking to one of our dealer partners the other day, and he says that he'll kind of like Carfax, but he'll use TractorZoom, and he'll, when having a discussion on a trade-in value, he'll just take TractorZoom, and it's his TractorZoom Pro account.
Yeah.
He'll turn it around and then show the farmer saying, hey, just so we're on the same page, I know you saw this one sale out there at auction time or whatever, and you're cherry picking a value because mine is certainly worth the record getter, and but they're just being very transparent, saying here is the TractorZoom database of all these auctions, all the other dealer listings. Here's where we fall, and they're having just a good partnership style of conversation, sitting on the same side of the table, and that trust, that transparency goes a long ways to furthering along the deal, because at the end of the day, as a farmer, I certainly want to feel like I got a good deal, but it's that not knowing part of, man, did I get taken advantage of it? Did I get a lemon or whatever? I do not want that. I don't want that hanging over my head. And so they're using this tool to help just provide this assurance to farmers. And it does. It speeds along the deal, makes everybody kind of feel good. They're looking at the same data, making the same educated decision.
Boy, if you're getting more like Carfax, you need to have kind of a logo or brand. They use the fox, don't they?
They do.
Carfax.
I know.
Yeah.
I've been told you need to have a little moniker, a little something or other.
You know what? Ryan Rusnick, he'd be the person to put up there. Yeah.
Just have his beard. Just have this massive broom of a beard, and that's what it is.
Well, for listeners that don't know this, Ryan writes a great column on agriculture.com, and it's about classic tractors, and you can get a lot of his wisdom in those columns, and it's a blast to read them. I find I've been tracking tractor history and writing a separate publication called the Aegis Iron Almanac for years, and I love history. And every time I read one of his columns, I discover things I didn't know. So
he puts so much research into it.
He has a crystal ball. He's getting into stuff that I'm not sure where he's getting his information, but it is solid. So Ryan, that's who you want as your
It is.
That would work really well.
If the listeners are out there on the TikTok and all that good stuff, I know he's got quite a few followers on there, and he'll give his little breakdowns of this tractor, what's it going to go for, this history piece of this machine was built, there's only two of its kind back in 1978, and the father sold it to the son, and they refound it years later. It is ridiculous on what he can dig up, but they're all interesting stories.
Just a bunch of brains there at TractorZoom, you guys. Thanks a lot, Andy. We'll talk next month about what are we going to talk about next month?
We're going to talk headers. So we're just moving on.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
But and platforms too, right?
Right. Yep. Yeah. Row crop and platform headers. So not to spoil this one, but I'll give a little bit of a cliffhanger. Yeah. No, where we were saying that the combine values, there will be some that hit auction. And so, we'll watch these values, but I don't expect combines to plummet this summer.
Right.
Headers might be a different story. There are so many out there right now that, again, it depends on what the dealers do with them and the value that farmers find in them. But we're pulling this data already, and it is interesting, to say the least.
Does this have to still deal with the changeover from standard header, conventional header to draper headers? That dumped a bunch of headers on the marketplace, but that's been 10 years ago
Right.
or more that happened.
Right.
These are predominantly draper headers, right?
Most are draper headers, especially the high value ones that we're tracking.
Right.
But it's not just draper headers. So you've got your row
True.
crop as well. Some
Right.
folding, some not. And I don't know exactly the cause of it, but I know that there's very certain defining features on a header. So draper header, for instance, you got
Right.
the width, but with the row crop header, is it folding? Is it not? Is it chopping? Is it not? Those seem to be some big valuation differences that I'll dig into and we could talk about next time on how big of a difference they make. But that also it creates a few more options out there of people that want one but not the other. So it's creating a bit of a supply chain issue.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. That'll be fun, Andy. So see you in July, right?
Yes.
You bet. Take care, all.
Sounds good. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you to our hosts today, Dave Mowitz and Andy Campbell, for sharing your expertise on the used machinery markets. Also, thank you to our sponsor, John Deere. For more stories like this, visit agriculture.com. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. And you can also follow Successful Farming on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. Also, be sure to check out our other podcasts, 15 Minutes with a Farmer and Successful Farming Daily, wherever you get your podcasts.